I want to talk about immigration and the open border. And sometimes when we confront immigration, we feel a sense of, well, almost hopelessness, because what can we do? We don't seem to be effective in being able to block what the Biden administration is doing, even though what they're doing is flagrantly lawless. But I think a recent interview that I read with Secretary Mayorkas, this is the Secretary of the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, suggests that he is in many ways pretty frustrated because his hands are being, even if in small, nevertheless significant ways, they are being tied. So it's, I think, important for us to register our victories, even if they are modest victories, even if they are victories that have to be ultimately solidified by us taking control of the House and the Senate and the presidency, and then reversing all these atrocious policies. So I want to talk about 3 small wins, and I also want to talk about a very telling admission by Mayorkas himself. So here's the first win, and that is that the big uproar about all those Haitians who were descending on American shores. Obviously, these are not people at the southern border. They're showing up from Haiti. And they're showing up because, yes, there's poverty in Haiti, but there's poverty in many parts of the world. Our immigration policies are not based upon you're poor, therefore you have a right to come to America. So here were the Haitians, and they were basically being seen en masse coming across the southern border. Huge public relations scandal, horrific images for Americans. Who are these people? And even though the Biden administration tried to turn the tables, look at these Texas Rangers rounding them up on horseback cowboy style, nevertheless, the Biden people realized this is a very serious problem. And so they began to then deport the Haitians, expelling thousands of them and sending them back home where they, of course, belonged. Victory number 1. Here's victory number 2. The Biden administration, as I mentioned on this podcast a couple of times, was getting ready, was on the verge of making gigantic financial settlements to families that said, we were families who were separated at the border, even if the separations were brief, even if they were temporary. They were so traumatic. We're not used to this at all. This is emotional hardship and pain. We need to be paid $450,000 each, not even per family, per person. And the Biden administration was like, this sounds reasonable. I think giving families, taking taxpayer money and giving Mexican families $1 million here, $1 million there, so they can basically go hit the Mexican casinos. They thought this was kind of a fair settlement. Well, once again, the public outrage over this made it impossible politically for them to go forward with this. And so they have ended those court negotiations over these financial compensation. Victory number 2. Victory number 3 is a court victory coming out of Texas. And Texas, I have to say, has been the center of the resistance to Biden's immigration policies. Just a flurry of lawsuits filed by Texas, really by Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's been on the show. And this has forced Biden to reimpose, even though not fully, Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. It's even forced Biden to continue some border wall construction, which is to say to close some gaps in the wall, not to build new sections of the wall, which they flatly refused to do, but at least to patch up the wall in places where there were sort of gaping holes. Now, let me turn to the statement by Mayorkas. We have fundamentally changed immigration enforcement in the interior. Quote, for the first time ever, our policy explicitly states that a non-citizen's unlawful presence in the United States will not, by itself, be a basis for the initiation of an enforcement action. Now, this, I think, is really significant. You've got a top Biden official basically saying it is our stated policy that we will not enforce the law. If you've got a guy in the United States, illegal, he's illegal. He admits he's illegal. But he doesn't have other violations. He's not a gang member. He doesn't have a criminal record. He's just an illegal. That by itself is not sufficient to initiate return or deportation proceedings. So what we have here is a truly lawless administration in the clinical sense of the term. There is a law. Our system says if you don't like a law, try to change it. They can't change the law. They're using the technique of, quote, enforcement to say, we're going to enforce it here, but not over there. In effect, what they're saying is we're going to, at least in these important respects, ignore the law.